Okay. Hello to everyone.
Well, hello to most everyone. There seems to be somebody missing, DC.
Yeah. At the moment, we are still waiting whether Victoria is going to join us or not. Well, remains to be seen. But at the moment, it doesn't look like she's going to do a show. So she did send me a list of points that she wanted to get across today in her debate. But as she's not here to present them herself, I guess I'll read through them and we'll see if Professor Bart Kay can debunk them for us and see what happens. All right.
First of all, though, I need to run around and do a victory lap, unopposed. Just it's a walk, boys and girls. Again, it's not the first time this has happened. People that want to mouth off about coming to teach me a lesson and not even showing up. It's a bit of a pattern of behaviour for these severely vegetarian individuals, isn't it? It seems.
It seems to be. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of talk, but they don't know how to do the walk.
That's it.
So, Oh well, there we have it.
Anyway, let's hear some of these ideas that Victoria sent you, and we'll deal with them in a discussion sense.
Okay, so number one, she has 6 points that she wanted to get across. So we'll start with number one. Ketogenesis is an alternative metabolic energy generation pathway brought on by cellular glucose starvation. I'm sorry, like this is kind of going to be a difficult for me. Oh, here we are.
I know it's hard for you. I know it's hard for you, DC.
Hi.
Wow. Hello. Good morning, Victoria. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late.
Did you have any trouble joining? That's all right.
Well, I was trying to use a different camera, but it didn't work. So here I am.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Camera.
Technical issues always come up. Technical issues always happen. Very nice to meet you. Sorry we started without you, but we didn't know if you were going to show up or not.
No problem. Right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that happens too, so it's all good. Victoria, you want to tell us, actually, before we get started, we'll go through introductions and qualifications, and just so everyone knows exactly where this advice is coming from. And Victoria, ladies first, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us your qualifications and background?
Yeah, my name is Victoria. I run the YouTube channel Nutrition by Victoria. I have a Master's of Science in Human Nutrition, a Bachelor's of Science in Biology. My intention was to go into healthcare, but prior to graduation, I got really interested in graduation from my biology degree. I got really interested in nutrition because I felt like there was a lack or misunderstanding of the implications on diet and the prevalence of disease. And of course, I think we can all agree here that the healthcare system really lacks in their understanding of human nutrition and using dietary modification therapy as a helpful practice for preventing disease or even helping to reverse it. So I specialize in metabolic health, and I help my clients and my viewers to understand how the human metabolism works from the inside out.
Well, very good. I think we can all agree on that. Hospital doctors and ignoring nutrition and intervention for conditions that are going around. But I agree. I totally agree with that one. Professor Bart Kay, you want to give us a rundown on you?
Yeah, I think most people probably have heard of me by now and kind of get the gist of my background. Former professor of health science over a 2-decade career, specializing in 3 or 4 different areas, starting out with the physiology of rest and exercise, moving on to human nutrition, and finishing off at the end with cardiovascular pathophysiology, all overarched, I guess, by a pretty good fundamental understanding of statistics, statistical inference, research methodologies, etc. I have a moderate list of publications, an interesting list of external multi-million-dollar peer-reviewed publications in the past with all sorts of organizations. Currently, however, these days, I'm purely a social media influencer, a marketer of the fine products by the folks at Cerule, and a consultant to those that want to get second opinions or even first opinions from me on this, that, or the other thing. So that's what I do. Oh, and I'm now a farmer as well, because I'm a tiger for punishment. So I bought a farm and trying to learn how to do that as well. So yeah, busy man.
Yeah, very busy. Yeah. Again, thank you both for the time, taking the time to do this. I think it's a good discussion for everyone to understand and to hear both sides, and where we can go from there. So, Victoria, we'll allow you to get bring your points across, and we'll try to just keep these short, direct. I don't want anyone speaking over each other, or don't want this get out of hand. And I don't. Some people get very passionate about this kind of subject, but honestly, we're all adults here, and we should be able to get through this without too much drama, I think. So, let's
speak for yourself, DC. I'm not an adult.
Okay.
I've got Charlie Brown syndrome, I'm told, but whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been told Peter Pan more than once myself.
Yeah, cool.
So,
all right, I'll try and keep it together with the adulthood.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so Victoria, you sent me a list of points that you wanted to get across. So do you want to start with number one?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention in my intro too that I am a mother of 3 and I'm currently breastfeeding as well. So that's like my main job right now, and then I do this nutrition education on the side. Yeah, my kids definitely keep me busy, but I do think that education is probably the most important aspect of helping people to understand which dietary path to take. And I know that Bart and I have opposing views here, but ultimately we'll leave it up to the viewers to decide what path they end up going down based on what gets discussed today. So the first point that I wanted to kind of duke out is the concept of, well, really the pathway of ketogenesis, and that it really is an alternative metabolic energy generation pathway brought on by cellular glucose starvation. So from my understanding, the human metabolism is fueled predominantly by glucose. So it's our preferred energy source, and glucose availability dictates the Randle cycle, and therefore energy generation preference, whether that's going to be for fat or glucose. So, when glucose is taken in, it's going to be used for energy production, particularly in individuals who have insulin sensitivity. For those that have insulin resistance, things go a little bit differently. We can bring up diabetics in this situation where they actually utilize a similar metabolic pathway to those who choose to eat a ketogenic diet just by default, from the lack of sugar being able to enter the cells from the insulin resistance being present. So when glucose intake is insufficient, the metabolic rate will decrease. And this is what I kind of specialize in, is helping people to rebuild their metabolism after there has been an issue with insufficient glucose intake, whether it's due to insulin resistance for whatever reason, or it's due to intentionally not consuming carbohydrate. So the metabolic rate decreases in order to preserve glucose availability. Low levels of oxaloacetate build up, low levels of oxaloacetate trigger ketogenesis to get started, as well as a buildup of acetyl-CoA in the TCA cycle. So that will kind of turn on ketogenesis and get, fatty acid oxidation underway and ketone generation to start fueling the system, because the bottom line is, like, our bodies want to stay alive. Okay. So we have these backup mechanisms like ketogenesis to provide an alternative fuel source in times of famine. So famine equals glucose insufficiency, lack of glucose being available in the diet. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I want to include here. Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to let Bart talk now?
Yeah, I think let
Okay.
Bart get into that one.
Okay.
Okay, right. So there were a number of threads there. What would be really awesome is if we can keep our discussion to point-wise, i.e. one point at a time, and we'll deal with it. Let's start at the beginning where you said that your understanding or your belief structure is that gluconeogenesis is an alternate source. Strictly not correct. What gluconeogenesis is a means by which the body can generate all the glucose that is required for the purposes that glucose is required for. It's not an alternate.
Right, but hold on.
Excuse me. No.
I said ketogenesis was an alternative pathway.
No.
But
Victoria.
I said ketogenesis.
No, Victoria. No, we're not doing this.
Hang on. Let's just let each other make their point, and then we'll. You can, after they've stopped speaking, then we'll. You can. Okay. Get into it.
Absolutely unacceptable behavior. I remain silent while you speak. You give me the same respect. Simple. Right.
But I said ketogenesis was the alternative pathway, not gluconeogenesis. I didn't talk about gluconeogenesis yet.
Fine. Remain silent. You can correct that at the end when I have finished speaking. Yeah. Right. Now, either ketogenesis or gluconeogenesis, whichever one you want to talk about, neither one is an alternate anything. They are parallel pathways that exist in our metabolic tree, if you want to think of it as a tree, or pathway, if you want to think of it as a pathway, whatever. All of these things function to the exact level that they are supposed to function at any given time, precisely in order to maintain our homeostasis. The exact requirement for exogenous glucose in the human diet is not 1 single gram ever. So to say an insufficiency of glucose intake is a nonsensical statement. It is scientifically demonstrably false. No such thing occurs because a sufficient amount of intake of glucose is none, not a single gram ever. Other than that, I was struggling to keep a track on what point it was you were actually trying to make there. So first of all, let's deal with the first point. No, it's not an alternate anything. It's an adjunct pathway. It's a parallel pathway. It exists for a reason and it works perfectly. It's not to do with starvation of anything or lack of anything. That's the thing that prevents the lack of anything. Go on.
I was going to say, so why is it that gluconeogenesis and ketogenesis both run when a person is starving, when they have no food? So you're saying that somebody in the case where a person is
hang on. All right. You've asked your question. So if you're asking why do those things occur when a person consumes no food, it's because there are several tissues in the human body that require glucose to run. Ergo, those systems run precisely in order to provide that glucose. Or an actual, at the end of the day, when you're talking about gluconeogenesis/ketogenesis, whichever, what you're really talking about is the provision of acetyl units for the TCA or Krebs cycle in those tissues that have to run on glucose. And so the body makes those. It's a normal part of the operation of a human body. It's part of the homeostatic mechanism. It's no stress or problem for the human body to do it. What's your point?
Gluconeogenesis is stimulated by cortisol.
So what?
That's a stress hormone.
No, that's a label put on it by people that want to call it a stress hormone.
Okay.
Well, at the end of the day, Victoria, if you want no stress in your life, you're going to be probably sadly disappointed because no stress means dead.
Well, you're right about that.
Well.
But
it's not a stress hormone, it's a hormone, and it has multiple roles in the human body, including it has a role to play in the activation of gluconeogenesis. So what?
Absolutely. But intake of sufficient carbohydrate will maintain normal cortisol levels.
Well, what? Hang on. Who's to say what's normal on the basis of what? According to whom?
On the basis of lab testing
Lab testing of whom?
of individuals when they go and seek a cortisol test.
Right. So who's going to go and seek a cortisol test?
A lot of my clients after they've done a carnivore diet.
Because you've told them that cortisol is a stress hormone, so they're going to go and look for it and see if
they come to me with the labs because they're having issues, right? Elevated A1C, elevated LDL, elevated cholesterol,
Right,
elevated ApoB.
None of those are issues, love. None of those are issues.
Glucose.
None of those are issues. They're just labs. A person's affect is what you should be looking at and treating, not their lab results.
Their efforts?
That's absolute nonsense.
So you're saying
affect.
Okay. So you're saying objective measures. So you're saying objective measures for health are not valid?
What I'm saying is I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you, what is normal? I wish that I was normal, just the same as you. You're singing
having lab work that's within range.
Whose range? Normal. According to whom? On the basis of what?
According to conventional medicine.
Ah, conventional medicine. Would that be the same conventional medicine that just told you that elevated cortisol is an issue, so is cholesterol and LDL? Because those are the things you've just tried to spout at me, all of which are fallacious nonsense.
Okay. Well, I think for the audience, it would be beneficial to maybe move on to the next topic.
So we're done with that, then, are we now?
Well, if I can just interject one question, Victoria, you just mentioned LDL, for example, elevated cholesterol. Mm-hmm. What exactly is the problem with elevated cholesterol?
According to the research, which is very kind of opposing right now because there has been a lot of talk about elevated LDL not being linked to increased cardiovascular disease risk, but it still can be an issue for those who are experiencing enhanced LDL oxidation, which is what creates the plaque formation and contributes
absolute nonsense, Victoria. That is
cardiovascular disease.
Listen, one of us is a cardiovascular pathophysiologist, love, and it's not you.
That doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. Are you a cardiovascular doctor?
It really does. Okay, look, tell you what. Let's go through the etiology of the development of atherosclerotic lesioning, shall we? And let's deal with this.
Okay.
Because that's real simple. Tell me, where do atherosclerotic lesions develop, Victoria?
They develop from the oxidation.
Not from, where do they develop?
It's being supplied by the diet.
No, where do atheroscleroses develop? Where in the body?
Predominantly in the blood vessels.
Which blood vessels? No, wrong again. False. So you actually have absolutely no idea whatsoever.
I'm not saying here that I am a cardiovascular specialist. Okay.
I am, and I'm telling you that LDL does not cause atherosclerosis. That's a fact. You've just said research shows, or the research is equivocal. Mm-hmm. Okay, the research is unable. The existing research is unable to inform on cause and effect for heart disease. You need a deterministic model. You need an understanding of what the disease process is, where it occurs in the body, how it occurs, the histology of that tissue, and then you can put together a model of how this disease process develops. Until then, you have absolutely no place and no business talking publicly to any audience whatsoever about the etiology of this disease. You are out of your lane. How's that?
I think that you are kind of like not, you're telling me that I'm wrong, but you're not explaining how you are right because you're not explaining.
Let's go through it. Let's go through it.
The last thing I want to say, though, is that a lot of this is brought on by insulin resistance. So I think that
insulin resistance is a construct. Please give me the name of a company. Please give me the name of a company that puts together and markets an insulin resistance meter.
Okay. They don't
Okay,
market
finish
insulin
your point,
resistance
Victoria.
meters. They sell glucose meters, which test for your blood sugar levels. But what
That's
I'm
right.
trying to
So that's
say
the thing
is
that can be
that
measured.
something I think we can all kind of agree upon is that the reason why you, Bart, do the carnivore diet, and DC, I believe that you're doing some kind of a low carb thing. And the reason why I eat low carb, or the reason why I eat high carb, low fat, is to manage insulin. So a lot of people go on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet so that they can lower insulin levels. And this produces a lot of beneficial effects, right? Because usually the person is presenting with elevated or hyperinsulinemia due to, you know, elevated blood glucose levels that have been chronic, and it's because of what they're eating, right? So both diets can produce beneficial results. I just have done the keto diet myself, never went full on carnivore, and I've done a lot of fasting and things like that. It's unsustainable, and it also produces impaired glucose tolerance. And actually, I found a literature paper that's on the Randall cycle where it says this right in the paper, that the Randall cycle can be problematic due to the fact that it is impaired glucose tolerance. Okay, the fatty acid oxidation preference impairs glucose tolerance, which can cause insulin resistance. So I listened to a talk, Bart, that you did about this topic, and you said that, you know, the Randall cycle is what dictates what insulin does, and you're right. But if you really want to cure insulin resistance and you want to not have impaired glucose tolerance, then eating a high carb, low fat diet is what needs to be adopted in order to have actual insulin sensitivity. And that is what is going to be preventable or preventative against chronic disease development like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc.
Again, with the number of threads all in one great big long spiel, again, I'm going to ask you, let's deal with 1 point at once and 1 point only at once, and we'll deal with it point-wise, because that's the only way to get through this. You've now changed the focus. Smoke and mirrors, look over there, something shiny, because you're getting absolutely hammered on cardiovascular pathophysiology. And now you want to go to something else, insulin resistance.
Oh, we've just lost
Bye-bye.
Victoria.
Okay. And now she wants to talk about insulin resistance, another thing she clearly doesn't understand. And then she wants to talk about the Randall cycle, a third thing she clearly doesn't understand. And then she wants to claim that it's healthy to eat a diet that is high in glucose and low in fat, when it's patently clear, obvious to anyone with more than 3 brain cells that that is false.
Yeah, I've got a question about that. How do you go from, I think there's a lack of understanding of micronutrients there, like swapping fat, like replacing fat with sugar. I mean, there's absolutely no nutrients in sugar. Why would you do that to your body? You know. So I mean, if she comes back, I'll ask her that, because it's just, I think clearly there's a misunderstanding there of what actually comes with fat. So
also, there are some immensely stupid people in the comment section, DC. It's incredible the amount of stupidity, arrogance, ignorance, and childish nonsense that's going on over there. I'm just sitting here laughing my tits off reading through that. Also, most of these people cannot conceive of or get it together in their heads that the grumpy professor thing is a big act, and that actually, while ever I'm doing that, the points I'm making are still absolutely valid, whether you like the way I'm doing it or whether you don't. So let's go through the first point anyway, about the development of atherosclerosis and how that is unrelated to lipids, actually. We asked Victoria, where does atherosclerosis occur?
There we are. Very good.
Welcome back. We missed you.
We always have technical issues.
I'm sure.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Actually, Victoria, just on one of those points that you just made when we were talking about the Randall cycle, I just want to have a question myself. Micronutrient wise, you are basically, what you're saying is that you are replacing fat intake with sugar.
Yes.
So can you explain to us what actual micronutrients are in sugar that can replace fat?
Well, it's not necessarily micronutrients that replace fat. The major macronutrients for energy generation in the human body are going to be coming from either glucose or fatty acids predominantly. So it's not that there is, you can run the system on sugar, you can run the system on oil, right? Obviously, doing either of the two is going to develop micronutrient deficiencies, which is why you really want to eat whole foods as part of your diet. But what I'm suggesting is that eating a diet predominantly based in carbohydrate as opposed to fat intake, where you're driving fat intake to be as low as possible, is going to promote insulin sensitivity. Basically, you're not running, fatty acid oxidation as predominantly. And there can be benefits to that because when you have too much fat that you're putting in the system for energy generation, you run into oxidative stress due to lipid peroxidation. So the whole concept here is that we're trying to decrease inflammation, decrease oxidative stress, increase insulin sensitivity and function, so that someone can live a healthy, happy, life, being relatively disease-free and keeping a lean, fit body, effortlessly. That's what my knowledge proposes.
Okay, so which lipids are you talking about becoming oxidized? And how much is too much fat?
That I would have to find in the research paper that I was reading talking about this specifically.
Okay, so it was just another statement you made because you felt like it.
No, not necessarily. Actually, I did a lot of research on the ketogenic diet prior to coming into this because it's not something that I talk about too regularly in my content, other than to avoid it due to the metabolic damage that it creates.
Okay, there is no metabolic damage caused by ketogenesis, none at all. What are you talking about, Victoria? That's absolute nonsense.
The research suggests otherwise.
Well, hang on. Cite it. Cite the research that suggests otherwise, because there isn't any. One of us has worked in this industry at the coalface as a nutrition researcher, among other things, for 2 decades, Victoria. And the other one of us is you. So you want to talk to me about what the research says, you cite it, my love. What research?
Okay, well, they're all on PubMed.
We know where to find research. That's not the question.
Yeah,
here. The question
well,
I'm asking you're saying research says, okay, I have plugged in
diet
for 2
and
decades.
lipid peroxidation.
2 decades I've looked into this.
Okay. But that doesn't mean
once again we're showing that you're completely out of your depth here as well. You're making vox pop comments. You're regurgitating messages that you believe you've seen or heard someone else say, or that you believe you've read in PubMed, without any actual understanding at all of the science that you're invoking. Science says is what you just told us. And now I'm saying to you, great, what science? And you're like, oh, go and look it up. No, science does not say a ketogenic diet causes any kind of metabolic damage whatsoever. No, it doesn't.
That's not true.
Try again.
It causes inflammation, oxidative stress, but it depends too, because there's
oxidative stress. You say that's another label applied to something because somebody wants to apply that label to it.
But
in the same way that we talked about one of those before. What do you mean oxidative stress? Exactly what do you mean by that?
Increased free radical generation.
All right. And how does the body deal with the generation of free radicals?
Well, we have the capacity to neutralize them to a certain extent, but when...
Okay, so it's not an issue then. Fantastic. So we move on. Great. Good.
No, that's not true, because even if what you're arguing is that a carnivore diet doesn't produce oxidative stress, which is, I think,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said to you that stress is a label applied to it because somebody wants to.
Well, then how would you describe a person who presents with diabetes and heart disease? Okay, because they usually go together, and people usually, end up in the hospital needing open heart surgery, of which I've seen in person. I've seen stents put in.
Well, before you go off on a great big long spiel about how terrible heart disease is, and we all agree,
yeah,
you've just conflated heart disease with oxidative stress.
Because that's where it starts.
According to some.
Well, what would you say is the causative factor for heart disease and diabetes?
For atherosclerosis and for diabetes, well, atherosclerosis is the development of lesions in specific, predictable geographical regions within the endothelial lining of the high-pressure side of the vascular tree, and it occurs where there is turbulent flow. It's caused by a physical injury and or by some oxidative and or glycative damage to tissues in that particular zone. That aggravates the situation, but it's not the cause of it. The cause of it is the physical damage to those tissues by that turbulent flow, usually caused in a large part by chronic hypertension, in fact. That's the etiology of heart disease.
But what causes
hypertension, the hypertension, is that the question?
Just in general, what you're saying, you're
oh my God, Victoria, what are you asking me? What are you asking me for the etiology of?
What causes heart disease? You described what heart disease was.
I just told you what causes heart disease. I just gave you a full rundown.
Oh, it's dietary fat intake. Oh, it's too much sugar. We're talking about diet and how it relates to disease development.
Oh, how it relates to. Well, that's a different discussion to what the cause of the disease process is, isn't it, Victoria?
But isn't that what today's discussion is about?
Well, you're telling me that you know all about the etiology of heart disease, which means the cause of it. And you're telling me it's about oxidative stress, and I'm telling you, no, it's not, love.
Right, caused by an excessive intake of dietary fat.
Wrong. Absolute nonsense. Complete utter garbage. Sorry. There is absolutely no support and evidence in scientific experimental studies that can support that ridiculous posit.
Well, according to some research that came out May of last year, the ketogenic diet induces p53 dependent cellular senescence in multiple organs, particularly the heart and kidney. And this article wasn't saying that a ketogenic diet isn't something you shouldn't do.
Do you see how you didn't cite an article then when I invited you to cite the article that you want to discuss?
That's why I ran into problems, because I was trying to pull them up on my computer and then it crashed and then I got kicked out.
Okay, so any study that says something causes something else is questionable straight away, isn't it? Because you just use the term causes.
But you haven't cited anything that you're referencing.
I don't need to cite anything. I don't need to cite anything.
Why? Do you know what a p53 dependent cellular senescence is? Do you know what p53 is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well then can you explain why a ketogenic diet induces senescence in those cells?
Well, I'm not convinced that it does. And that paper that you're citing there, I'm absolutely certain doesn't establish it either. It does matter, because you just cited that article. You just tapped that article and said, here's some research that absolutely shows X, Y, or Z. And I'm inviting you to share that study with us so that we can look at what's wrong with it and show why it doesn't show what it purports to show, because that's almost certain. Well, as soon as you say something causes something, then what you're doing is showing an inability to actually competently read science. Can I ask you, Victoria, how many peer-reviewed publications do you have in your own name?
I don't have any. I never did my PhD.
You don't need a PhD to have peer-reviewed publications. It helps.
Well, it helps.
Because that's your ticket to the club. But here's the thing.
Sure.
Given the fact that you have never worked in research,
so this
you have never published anything as a researcher,
that doesn't mean that I don't know how to read
in a position. It does. That's exactly what it does mean, Victoria. You are not competent to read the science. I'm sorry to point to the facts here, but the facts of the matter are, if you have never been involved in producing science works yourself, you have no idea what goes on behind the scenes or how to make these inferences or what's appropriate or not. You are out of your league here. You are not qualified to speak about science.
The fact that the audience is probably like confused about is that you're not rebuttaling to me in a way other than telling me that
the word is rebutting.
Okay. Okay.
The word is rebutting. What I'm telling you is you want to keep saying, here's some research that shows. It's not the first time you've done it in this discussion. You've been invited twice to cite the research that you're claiming shows something.
Okay, well,
you failed to do so twice.
But why aren't you able to provide a response that says, okay, this is why a ketogenic diet doesn't do this when the research says that it does? And by the way,
it doesn't still, Victoria. The research still doesn't say that it does anything of the sort. Still,
honestly,
this is my whole point, saying you're not competent to say what the research says.
Okay, guys, I think we might move on to the next point. There is actually, I can actually present a study that did come up. Actually, I think it finished just last week. That proves that cholesterol had nothing to do with heart disease.
No, that's not true either, DC.
Well, sorry. Well, that's the gist of the paper anyway.
What that paper, if you're talking about that ridiculous CTA paper done by Norwitz and et al. Right. Yeah. What that study shows is absolutely nothing, exactly nothing. That paper is incompetent to its very core to say one thing one way or the other about heart disease.
Yeah.
What they found was a lack of association between several factors that are generally thought erroneously to be risk factors in a specific delimited population under absolutely no sort of observation and control that would remotely give us any cause to be excited about cause or effect in any way, shape or form. That study was also conducted by a very young research team. What they've done is tack on an experienced author to the end of it as the senior author, the last author. And from his comments made publicly since the publication of that paper, it is clear he hasn't even read it.
Well, yeah.
All right. So Nick, Adrian, Dave, et al., you guys are finished now. Your credibility is in the toilet along with Matthew Budoff's.
Yeah.
It's ill discipline. It's nonsense. Your study doesn't show dick about fuck. Right. What's next?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on.
I have a question though for Bart because I'm really curious.
Please, Victoria. Yeah.
How did you come into believing that the carnivore diet? Because isn't that what you practice, right? And that's what you promote, correct?
90-95% most of the time. That's about where I sit.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm not 100% carnivore. Never have been.
Right, because I did see you drink goat's milk in one of your videos, and that contains carbohydrate. Right.
That's correct. It does.
So what I'm curious about then is your philosophy on diet and how you came to that, conclusion.
Right. My conclusion about what the best diet for any given human being is likely to be is based on the actual hard sciences that inform on that, i.e. physical anthropology, organ systems, comparative anatomy and physiology, studies of our metabolic pathways, etc., combined with my own experience of having done it and the anecdotes of now hundreds of thousands and millions actually of folks who are following this way of eating and finding ostensibly the same as what the rest of us are finding in terms of the associated changes in our health. Basically, science is not able to answer this question about what is the best diet for human beings. If you're looking for an answer in human nutrition science, you are looking in the wrong place. There is no good science extant anywhere in this field. It's all theology, it's all ill-disciplined claptrap, and it's all bought and paid for.
Very good points.
But how can you prove that what it is that you are subscribed to is how a human should eat then? Because I really didn't get anything out of
I
what
don't
you
propose
just
to prove
said.
anything of the sort. I don't propose to prove
Okay.
anything. What I'm telling you is I have looked into this a great deal in the fields of science, the actual hard sciences, out with the human nutrition science, which isn't a science, it's nonsense. All of that has pointed me towards a very strong, very clear understanding of the human system, its functioning, etc., that tells me absolutely how it is I should fuel my body. I have been doing that myself to a 90 to 95% range for over a decade now. And anecdotally, for me, that's working for me. I don't need to prove dick. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm just here to tell you the facts. The facts are anyone that says human nutrition science is at all valid or can provide us with answers has been fooled. And that's coming from someone who worked at the coalface in that industry as a publishing research scientist for a number of decades. I know exactly how ugly the industry is from the inside out.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
People that say, cite this, cite that, cite the other thing, prove this, prove that. That's not what I'm here to do.
But that's what you're asking me to do.
No, you're saying here's some research that shows, and I'm inviting you to cite it so we can discuss the research that you think shows something so that we can show you how it is that you've been fooled. And in fact, what you are suggesting shows X, Y, or Z, in fact, does no such thing. Without even seeing what paper you're trying to tap there, I know absolutely that it's a pile of garbage and it will take me less than 2 minutes to pull it to bits.
Well, I would love to be able to share my screen so we could kind of go over that. Because honestly,
Lisa can let you do that.
Completely. Well,
I can let you do that.
Oh, good. Yay. Okay. Because here's this. This is from Science Advances. It's the ketogenic diet induces the P53. But really, I mean, what else I wanted to say just in response to my question for you, Bart, is that I am experiencing my own, success with eating a high carbohydrate, extremely low fat diet. I've done this and I've had 3 children, 3 healthy children. I produce a large amount of breast milk. I'm an athlete. I maintain a low body fat percentage for an almost perimenopausal woman. So I can understand, that a lot of your experience is based on, probably what you've tested for yourself. And I'm here to say that, I have the same experience. I'm not just reading a bunch of papers and then telling people, this is what I think you should do without having tested the information for myself. And then you also said too, though, and I'm almost done, that, human nutritional science to just throw it out, but you acknowledge that ketogenesis and gluconeogenesis are pathways that you can use for energy generation.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
You said energy. I never used the word energy. We can talk about energy later too if you like. I've actually got 3 hours spare. We can do this for 3 hours if you like, Victoria.
It depends on my child and when he wakes up from his nap.
Right. Okay. So what you're saying is that you're anecdotally telling us that you feel healthy and you feel like your diet is benefiting your health. Mm-hmm. And it may well be that there are some short-term or medium-term health benefits of eating the kind of diet that you propose is a good thing over a standard diet. Because a standard diet is the worst possible diet just about a human being can eat. Okay. However, that doesn't mean your diet is optimal. There are reasons mechanistically to speculate that your diet may not be, in the same way that people that sit on your side of the fence speculate about mechanisms by which they propose that our diet may not be ideal long-term either. There is no scientific evidence on cause and effect hard health outcomes in human beings over any period of time that either one of us can tap. They do not exist. However, and it's for the listener to form an opinion in their own mind as to which of the sets of proposed mechanisms of harm of these diets are valid or not, which one, the other one, or both. That's what we're here to do, I thought. And I'm happy to do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You make a good point too, because a lot of this research that I've been reading is all done on animal models.
Correct, which are completely invalid.
Yeah. So, and I believe that they stopped doing things like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Minnesota human starvation experiment that was performed, but they're not ethically able to, reproduce those kinds of studies anymore, which I think, unfortunately, hinders our knowing of a lot of things, and then it leaves, for people to figure things out for themselves due to that. But
so you think having ethics in research is a bad thing? Is that what you just said?
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying that it can hinder the results, obviously, because then you're left to animal models which don't have the same physiology that we do.
That's right. I'm not a mouse, and neither are you.
Right.
Right. So there's no point talking about mouse studies.
Right. Which is what a lot of the ketogenic diet information, whether it's pro or con, has been done on. It's been done on mice. Although I did find one that was a 14-day ketogenic diet that I think was just looking at weight loss in particular.
Okay.
And it showed that the people
how far beyond the tenure of any given study can you extrapolate the findings of that study to a longer period of time?
I think I'm pretty good at understanding what it is that a study is trying to reproduce, and also finding reasons why it's invalid.
Do you see how that's not an answer to the question I just asked you? Do you see how that's just words that are actually nothing to do with what I just asked you? What I asked you was,
no, I
how
think
long
what you're
beyond
saying
the tenure
is,
of a excuse me, how long beyond the tenure of a completed study, i.e. a 14-day study, how many days can we extrapolate those findings to another population? Beyond 14 days.
Right. It has to be a much longer study and
right.
a much
Not at all is the answer to the question. Not one single day longer than 14. Okay, so a 14-day study is of absolutely no value to us whatsoever. Okay, so we've got animal studies which are invalid, or we've got 14-day human studies which are of no value.
Right.
Okay.
I think, though, that I've been trying to argue in favor of a ketogenic diet based on the research, though. So you've just been telling me that by understanding. Okay.
Look, if anything, what the research, such that it is, what that enables us to do is to pretty much dismiss any idea that ketogenic diets are harmful, because there is no evidence that it is so.
But there's also no evidence that it's not.
Correct, but the person making the positive claim is the person that's responsible for backing that claim up with evidence.
Right.
So what I'm saying is there's no evidence, and that is correct. That is unassailable. You previously in this discussion tapped a study which you then didn't actually bring up, which we still can if you like.
I have it on here. How do I screen share on this?
If you should have a present button down there. And then
right.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
So Victoria, what I'm suggesting to you is that you've made the positive claim by tapping that research. You've said research shows. Okay, show us the research that you propose shows something. Let's have a look at it.
Can you guys see this?
Not as yet. Oh, here it comes. Here it comes.
Yeah.
Exciting times. Okay, so first of all, straight away.
I'm not trying to be difficult or.
Right, straight away, Victoria, let's read the title of this paper. Ketogenic diet induces. We've got a problem straight away, because induce is a cause and effect claim. So it better be good. And secondly, what's a ketogenic diet? I'm sure it's defined in this paper, unlike the one that Norwitz and al. Put forward. They haven't defined what a ketogenic diet is in their paper, by the way. All right, and it induces a p53-dependent cellular senescence in multiple organs. Okay, so what? Right, let's read through the abstract. If you'd like to scroll up a bit for us, Victoria, we can read that.
Sure.
It says a ketogenic diet is a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet that leads to the generation of ketones. Well, a standard diet leads to the generation of ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying is this is a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. Okay, what's high-fat and what's low-carbohydrate? Okay. While ketogenic diets improve certain health conditions and are popular for weight loss, detrimental effects have also been reported. Well, so what? Lots of things get reported and not. Here we show mice on 2 different... We're done, Victoria. We're done. This is a mouse study.
the mice showed up.
Right, we're done. We're finished with the study now. So, no, you did not tap a study that shows ketogenic diet induces anything in human beings whatsoever. Finish. Okay.
Hey, I appreciate that if it's a mouse study, you're just like, see ya.
That's right. Bye. We're done with that. So what I'm saying, this is what I mean, Victoria, about suggesting to you earlier, and I wasn't trying to be rude. I'm just telling you the truth, okay? You do not have the experience or the knowledge to read academic literature competently, because you sat there without a hint of comedy or irony, and you told me, here is some research that shows a ketogenic diet causes this, that, or the other thing. And within 2 or 3 lines, we find out you're talking about a mouse study.
Hey, fair enough, but I think
Okay.
but here's the thing. If I'm a viewer right now and I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, I want to like lose weight and I want to get healthier and I want to prevent disease and I want to, I know, David, your interest is in cancer prevention, correct? And management. Okay, so let's maybe get to talking about that and like how to explain to the viewers, okay, well, this is what we think that you should do or what we don't think you should do or whatever it is. Because I think, Bart, when I started watching your channel initially, I appreciate you, like your commentary, but I don't get anything out of it in terms of like, if I'm a viewer and I'm like, hey, do I want to like follow this guy for information? But really, he just tells people like what not to follow, right? What should I do as a viewer? So maybe we could...
Bart also has a nutritional science channel where it actually delves into all the science behind it too.
But how do you know?
Can I respond, please, to what you've just said, for goodness sake? Okay, at the end of the day, I don't talk a lot about what science says about human nutrition on my main channel, because I'll tell you what science says about human nutrition. Almost fuck all. Not a damn thing on any topic, just about. It's rubbish, all of it.
So what is somebody supposed to eat?
Well, I can give an opinion on that, and I do give an opinion on that. I have a strongly held opinion on that.
Okay.
And the reasons behind that opinion of people... Excuse me, Victoria, for goodness sake. Okay, at the end of the day...
I just want to make it clear that we're talking about opinions, though. We're not talking about science.
Did I not just make that very clear myself? Did I need you to interrupt me to make that any clearer? I was already very clear about that. Very clear indeed. I can give you an opinion on what the ideal human diet is. Can I finish, please?
Time.
Can I finish, please, Dave? Seriously?
Let's go.
All right. I can give you an opinion on what the ideal diet for a human being is, and I can give you the logic behind it, and I do that on my channel. And it doesn't come from human nutrition science. It comes from the anthropological sciences, the understandings of the comparative anatomy and physiology, the organ systems, the metabolic pathways, etc., that all point clearly and unequivocally in the direction of what the ideal diet for a human being is likely to be. I've been very clear about that on my channel from the start.
And what is that?
Well, I've said it a million times. It's hyper-carnivore.
So you can prove how, but how can you prove that you're right?
I can't with science. Not with human nutrition science. I can make a pretty strong argument, and I do make a very strong argument, I believe, from those other branches of science that I just invoked. And I have done multiple times. Anyone that's watched more than about 2 or 3 of my videos will see that that's my whole message.
But I think
let me ask you this, Victoria, you can think I'm wrong, but if you think I'm wrong about any of the things that underpin my opinion about what the ideal diet for a human being is, I'm going to invite you to tell me where I'm wrong.
Because it's an opinion. It's not based in anything.
Because it's an opinion. Okay, my opinion is that the sun has just come up. I can't see it. My opinion is the sun has just come up because this is the time of day at this time of year in this country that it comes up roundabout. Am I wrong? It's only an opinion.
Why do you call it the sun?
Because it is the sun.
But why don't you
What
call
the
it a
hell are you
star?
talking about now, love?
Because it's actually a star.
But it's a star that we call the sun. What is your... Jesus, this is just ridiculous, Victoria. Seriously.
Okay, well, let's get back to the point Victoria's trying to make. Like, she's trying to...
I'm wrong because I've got an opinion. Well, great. Tell me what's wrong with my opinion about what the ideal diet for a human being is. Please take shots at or try and cut down the underpinning logic I have presented multiple times on my channel over multiple years.
So
well, you said that you... Go ahead.
So let's just break this into simple form. Okay, Victoria, you're saying that high carbohydrates, meaning basically sugar, you even on your website you say that you have a high fruit and candy diet, and that's healthier than fat. So let's break it. Why is that healthier? And then we'll get Bart to say, okay, why is fat healthier? All right, let's break it up into that. And all right, so we should be able to get some common ground here.
Yeah, so I subscribe to about a 90% carbohydrate diet in terms of macros, with about 5% coming from fat and 5% protein, which is like the opposite of Bart, probably, where, large.
It's also the opposite of what's likely to lead you to long-term health. I can promise you that.
I have zero symptoms of
currently,
insulin resistance
currently,
or anything. I've been
insulin
doing
resistance
this for...
is still a construct, lovely. It's still a construct. There is still no company that sells an insulin resistance meter.
Well, how can you...
It's still a fallacious, ridiculous idea.
Okay. Then if I'm wrong, what about it is wrong when glucose is utilized to create ATP, whether it's endogenous or exogenous? Okay.
What is your question? I'm not sure what your question is.
My question is why am I wrong?
Wrong about what?
About the way that I eat. You just said that I was going to develop all these health problems long term. Because
the huge amount of sugar that you're consuming will cause damage to your tissues long term, absolutely, without any question.
But how?
And because, well, from glycation.
But sugar has a 0 in terms of advanced glycation end product rating.
What
0
on earth are you talking about?
Advanced glycation end products.
Which advanced end glycation products? Which ones?
So when you eat a food...
Answer the question. Which end products are you talking about?
Glycotoxins.
Which ones still?
Just in general. Okay, you're
so
saying
once
that
again,
sugar
you actually have
glycation.
No idea what you're talking about again.
Why do you think that you do, though? Because I'm saying that sugar has a 0 rating in terms of advanced glycation end products. Okay, so how can it cause glycation in the system?
First of all, you still haven't given us what you mean by end glycation products. You haven't named any of them. Secondly, you're talking about a rating. Well, a rating is a thing imposed by a person on something. Just like insulin resistance is a construct, so is this rating you're talking about. Okay, what we do know without any question is that glucose absolutely does cause damage to tissues through glycation. This is not even at debate or question. This is a known scientific fact, for goodness sake. And you're sitting there saying sugar does not damage your tissues? It is a fact.
Fat causes glycation.
Fat causes glycation now, does it?
It's the opposite. It does.
No, it doesn't, love. No, it doesn't. Absolutely does not. Rubbish.
Okay,
you can't just sit there and make shit up and expect to be taken seriously.
But I'm not making anything up. You're sitting here saying that what you're proposing is law and fact, but you have no evidence to support that.
Are you seriously questioning the fact that glucose glycates tissues, especially when it's in concentrations above what the body needs right now?
How does glucose cause glycation?
By binding chemically to the tissues, by becoming an adjunct to those tissues, by altering the conformation of those tissues by chemically binding to them.
And
this is a known
fat
fact. Fat does not cause glycation, because glycation by definition is the addition of glucose to our tissues that isn't supposed to be there. For goodness sake, Victoria.
But you're still producing glucose even if you're not consuming it.
Hang on,
So
now you're changing the topic again.
Really the
now
problem?
You're changing the topic again because you've been absolutely spanked again. You're telling us that fat causes glycation. That is absolutely, unequivocally, definitely false, in fact. No, it doesn't, because glycation, by definition, is the addition of glucose to our tissues, not
to
fat.
Proteins, nucleic acid, and fatty acids.
Yes, that is correct, but that still doesn't rebut what I've just said, because what I've just said is still absolutely a fact. And you've just made some... Oh my God, are you serious?
But how can you prove this?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the tenor of the discussion we've got here. I'm being asked to prove something that is a known scientific first principle, that glucose can and does bind chemically to our body tissues. The higher the concentration of glucose, the more likely this binding is, and these additional glucose molecules that bind to the tissues change the conformation of those tissues and interfere with the function of those tissues. It's one of the things that is involved in aging and the breakdown of our function. And it can do all sorts of things in all sorts of tissues, including in the brain, clearly, it seems. Because I'm being faced here with a person that's telling me that fat causes glycation. A person that claims to be knowledgeable about human nutrition.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that fat causes glycation. I'm saying
you said it 3 or 4 times and demanded absolutely that it was true.
You still have the sugar bond.
Again, what is your point?
But how do you know?
Other than trying to deflect away from the clear, patent fact that you actually have no idea what you're talking about whatsoever. Now you're just trying to change the topic again. We still have the sugar bond. What do you mean by that, Victoria? What are you trying to get at now, for God's sake?
What I'm trying to say is that the cause for sugar being problematic when it comes to, glycation, right, all has to do with impaired glucose metabolism. It doesn't have to do with dietary intake of sugar.
That's false. No, that is false.
But how can you prove it? Like you say that, but where is your science?
You cannot refer to a toxic reaction to a known toxin as impaired function. The exact requirement exogenously for carbohydrates in the human diet is still the same as it was at the beginning of this discussion, and that is not 1 single gram ever. There is an individual tolerance to the intake of this toxic overplus of glucose mostly, and fructose, which is also a real problem, actually worse than glucose, it seems. Absolutely.
According to what, though? According to what? How are you coming to these
According to the level of glycation damage detectable in lab tests of tissues exposed to both of these sugars.
Oh, so you're referring to science?
No, I'm referring to some lab tests that showed, and I'm referring to the tests that we can take on any given living human being right now. If you like, we can take some blood and get a measurement of the glycation damage of your red blood cells, can't we? This is a known fact.
Hemoglobin A1C test.
That's right. Oh, you do know something. That's impressive. Good.
Yeah, right. But I mentioned that at the very beginning of this talk today, and you threw it out.
Because that's not what we were talking about. Because you're all over the place. You are unable, it seems, to stay on topic for more than 3 seconds.
Hemoglobin A1C.
Right. Well, where is that a problem? How is that a problem? Elevated. According to whom, on the basis of what?
Well, you just said that we can test this in a lab, right?
That's right.
And an elevated hemoglobin A1C would indicate that there is glycation damage.
According to whom? On the basis of what?
Well, how would you evaluate glycation damage then? according to
in the
a
context of the
hemoglobin
whole
A1C test.
person, in the context of the whole person, their affect, what their dietary pattern has been hitherto for the last whatever period of time, etc. Because the threshold value imposed by the allopathic community on what they call elevated, which is a threshold value, ridiculous, but there you go. What is an elevated A1C for one person will not be an elevated or damaging or dangerous A1C for another person necessarily. So a lab test.
So you're saying that you have to see
so
what
once again, you
somebody's
can't let me even
eating.
finish a sentence before you have to jump on top of me.
No, I'm just trying to understand how you evaluate whether
I've just told you how I evaluate
damage.
it. I've just told you how I evaluate it. Well, if you'd let me finish the sentence, you'd probably get a better chance of understanding what I'm saying. I know I'm using one or two words bigger than wheelbarrow, Victoria, but nonetheless, you should probably listen to all the words before you start jumping in and asking more questions, shouldn't you? So here we go. A person with an A1C over 5.6, 5.7, depending which territory you're in even, is universally stamped, referred to and classified as having an elevated A1C by the allopathic medical community, irrespective of their background, what they've been eating, how they've been eating, etc.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The same person with the same A1C who has had a very, very stable blood glucose level for the last 2 or 3 months is not in the same situation. It is not the same thing, and their likelihood of a problem is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. There's the answer. A person gets evaluated on their history and their affect.
Okay, can
At least
I
that's what a sensible hang on. At least that's what a sensible clinician does. Now,
Okay.
Victoria, go.
Okay. So I have a client who recently presented with an elevated hemoglobin A1C following a carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm. That's what we expect. We see that almost universally.
So you're saying that it's normal to have an elevated hemoglobin A1C on a carnivore diet?
Depends on how you define elevated. What number are we talking about?
Over 5.6.
Well, what number? Because over is not a number.
Okay, a 6.
Was it 6, or you just made that up?
I don't remember specifically, nor am I at liberty to display that information. But
well, you don't
I
need to
believe
display
it
the
was
information. You can
6.
look at it. You don't need to identify a person. You're saying you think it was a 6.
It was.
Was it a 6?
Definitely over a
6?
5.6. Let's say it was a 6. Okay.
Why would we say it was a 6? You're saying you had a client that presented with an elevated A1C, and I've just said to you, great, what number? And you can't even tell me that.
Because I don't remember offhand.
Okay,
exactly
so let's say it was 5.6 then. Let's not say it was 6. Let's say it was 5.6 because that's more likely.
She was concerned because it was very high.
Very high, according to whom, on the basis of what?
Like being
Still.
But why would a carnivore diet cause a high A1C? Hemoglobin
because
A1C?
the homeostatic set point for, well, if you'd listen, I'll tell you, because the homeostatic set point for gluconeogenesis goes up precisely in order that there's enough glucose in a stable way to serve those tissues that need glucose. Furthermore, there is very good inference that the lifespan of red blood cells is longer in carnivore eating populations, thus leading to the likelihood of any one given hemoglobin molecule being glycated because it's been alive longer. Ergo, that number is a bit invalid. And finally, there is absolutely no clinical evidence extant anywhere in the literature that 5.6, 5.7, 5.8 or 6 is injurious to a person long term if their blood glucose is not hugely variant.
So let's get back to the topic of glycation then. And you're saying that you would measure that with a hemoglobin A1C. Well, what number would infer to you that somebody is experiencing glycation damage from sugar?
Well, again, what person? What's their background? What's their affect? What have they been eating hitherto for the last, say, 6 months? I need the full history before I can make any kind of prognostic statement on that person. A single lab test taken on one occasion by itself will not inform.
So you're saying that gluconeogenesis production of glucose is not injurious to the system because it doesn't cause glycation?
No, I didn't say anything remotely similar to that.
Okay.
Not at all. In fact, we weren't talking about that whatsoever. You've just changed the topic completely again.
We're still on the topic of glycation.
Right. So the way that glycation is measured is with a lab test. The prognostic meaning and value of that test depends on the person from whom that test was drawn.
Well, in my clinical experience and my own personal experience, a normal hemoglobin A1C can be expected eating a high carb, low fat diet. It does sugar is not directly
The same is true for a diet which is high in fat and low in carbohydrates. The exact same is true. Those people also have a normal A1C value for them. What's your point?
I've worked with plenty of people who have presented with elevated or high hemoglobin A1C.
According to whom, on the basis of
diet.
What? Still.
According
and I'm not arguing with you. I'm not arguing with you that carnivores do tend to present with higher A1Cs than might be expected by people who do not understand the physiology underpinning.
What is your evidence that red blood cells live longer in carnivores? Because I've found that anemia is common in people following a ketogenic carnivore diet, and that causes red blood cells to die faster.
Okay, I have not found any such thing myself in my clinical practice. Neither have I seen anything clinical in the literature that would suggest to me that what you've just said is correct at all. The evidence that I'm talking about is a study, which I don't have right in front of me right now, but people can go and find it for themselves if they like, where they measured the breakdown products of red blood cells, and from that they were able to make an estimate on the lifespan of the red blood cells, and it turned out to be something like 10 to 14 days longer on average in the cohort that they looked at in human beings, free living human beings. That was what they found. They found a pretty strong inference that would suggest red blood cells live longer. Whether or not it's true, it doesn't even actually matter. This is just an interesting mechanistic speculation. At the end of the day, what remains true and unassailable is that there is no evidence extant anywhere that can say an A1C of 5.6, 5.7, or 6 is a problem, a risk factor, or injurious, definitely, in any way to a human being whose blood glucose does not divert out of range. Because the damage that gets done is when the blood glucose goes out of range, for want of a better term.
But I don't experience my blood glucose going out of range, and I follow a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. How would you explain that?
I wouldn't need to explain it. There's nothing to explain there. At the end of the day, what you're telling me is that your affect feels good to you. You feel healthy. You feel like what you're doing diet-wise is good for you. And I'm saying there's pretty good evidence to suggest that long-term that's pretty unlikely to continue to be the case, on the basis that human beings are absolutely, unequivocally, and definitely evolved for a hypercarnivore diet, and that glucose above our requirement is toxic.
It would be when you're consuming a carnivore diet on top of it. I am curious what your take is on Paul Saladino, because he seems to be combining the two.
Yeah. Paul Saladino is an imbecile. That's my opinion on Paul Saladino. He's an absolute fucking imbecile. He's wrong. Yeah. He's out of his lane. He's a psychiatrist, for God's sake. He should go and shrink heads. That's what his training is. And he doesn't even do that, by the way. He's a trained medical professional with an MD qualification. He's done a rotation in psychiatry, so he can call himself a psychiatrist, but he's never practiced medicine, not a single day in his life. Now he thinks he's an expert in nutrition somehow, even though he's not studied that. He's gone off half-cocked, done the carnivore diet completely wrong, caused himself a bunch of health issues in so doing, and has solved that by subterfuge, by pouring a bunch of contraindicated, unnecessary carbohydrates down his neck that will absolutely cause him damage. And patently, if you take a look at the boy, and compare him to even a few years ago, you'll find it hard to disagree with what I've just said in terms of the patent aging that's occurred in the boy. He's also a coward because he pretends not to know who I am, even though he and I made some videos together several years ago. I don't know who that is when he was questioned, said Paul Sullivan.
If I can add an anecdote, I have tests done on a regular basis. Tests change from time to time, and how you prepare for blood tests and everything like that. So that your accuracy and things like that is vastly varied depending on what the person is doing before the blood test. For my own blood cells, my A1C did elevate on the carnivore diet, but it does state that the health of my red blood cells is improving, and the red blood cells are living longer. I've got the proof. I've got miles of blood tests right here that say the same thing. So that's just one example. But I do have a question for you, Victoria. You are in a high, you say, a high carbohydrate diet. You eat a lot of fructose, mostly you eat candies and things like that, which is high in fructose. So what is the I would like to do you know the effects of what fructose does in the body, what it does to the liver in particular and to the brain?
It really depends on what, and Bart's going to disagree here, on one's insulin sensitivity in terms of the fate of fructose, because it doesn't directly just become triglyceride and create fatty liver disease. Okay. In fact, I've been eating this way for
Victoria,
13 years.
You need to stop.
Hold on, I'm being interrupted, and
it's not the first time I've been interrupted, is it? See how you like it. It's not good, is it? But I do need to jump in here because you're just talking nonsense again.
But I'm not talking nonsense. I've never had a blood test come back that said that I was having an issue because of my fructose intake. In fact, my blood sugar levels are all normal. What test are you talking about?
So hang on. The problem with fructose is nothing to do with your blood glucose level. Nothing at all.
Right, because it doesn't require insulin to be metabolized. But
so therefore it's got nothing to do with your insulin sensitivity then. For God's sake.
Right, but it would show up as a uric acid test elevated, and that's never happened.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily at all.
Well, I personally, in my opinion, right, am not experiencing ill effects of consuming a diet that's high in, I would say my diet's split though. It's about 50% glucose fructose in terms of my overall carbohydrate intake, because I do subscribe to eating fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch with sugar added depending on the sweetness, and then I consume starch at dinner time, so rice and potatoes predominantly with some vegetables.
Wow, there's going to be a price to pay for that at some point.
I'm still waiting.
Little green apples. Well, keep waiting.
I've lost about 40 pounds when I've.
So what? What's that got to do with the damage that the sugar is doing to your body?
But you can't prove that on me though. There's no proof.
What I'm suggesting to you is why don't you just look? It's your funeral, love. You just keep doing it, and you will find out sooner or later what the problems are of basically attempting to fuel yourself on a diet which is completely inappropriate for a human being. Let me ask you this.
That's your opinion, though.
Since you didn't understand the question that Dave asked you, let me ask you again this way, more directly. What is the
I don't think I was able to answer the question that Dave asked me before being interrupted, though.
Well, isn't that amazing? Okay, let me ask you the question that should have been asked.
Hold on. I just want to say too, I probably don't have a whole lot of time left. My kids just came home from school. The baby just got up from a nap. So whatever we want to get in really quickly, I probably have about 10 more minutes.
All right. Tell me what the effect is concomitantly, definitely, absolutely, by virtue of the metabolic pathways involved. Tell me what the effect, please, is of consuming fructose on the ATP concentration in your hepatic system, in your liver cells. What happens to the ATP in those cells? when you metabolize fructose?
Well, it depends on.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't depend on anything. Concomitant absolutely occurs. As a function of metabolizing fructose, what happens to the ATP concentration in your hepatic cells?
It goes down.
Right. So is that a good thing?
I think that it's an energy demanding cycle. So of course it's going to utilize
What the
ATP.
purple fuck does that mean, love?
It means that there's a lot of metabolic processes that occur within our body that utilize ATP for them to even run. De novo lipogenesis is one of them. The creation of glycogen is another. So just the fact that fructose metabolism requires ATP, I don't think is enough for you to say that, you know, you shouldn't consume it.
I didn't say it requires ATP. I asked you what happens to the concentration of ATP in those cells, and you said it goes down.
And then it's also proposed that there's a uric acid
buildup. Is it a good thing or is it not? Is it a good thing to drain your cells of ATP?
No, but I think this is all happening
Thank you very
much.
No is the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
That doesn't mean that you're right about this, though, because I'm not experiencing any ill effects from consuming.
At the moment, yes,
fructose.
At the moment, absolutely.
No, I've been doing this for 13 years, and my health has only continued to improve. Are you gonna tell people that fruit isn't good for them? It isn't good to eat an orange. How do you create vitamin C?
I don't need to create vitamin C. I get it from my diet, from the meat.
Oh, meat doesn't contain vitamin C.
Oh my God. Yes, it fucking does.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does still. Wow. It still does. Even if you don't think it does, it still does. Do I have scurvy? Do I look like I have scurvy?
I'm not sure. You take a lot of supplements, so I can assume that helps to
too.
cover.
No, false. I do not take a lot of supplements. Absolute bullshit.
I see a lot of supplements just on this little,
These are images of supplements.
There's three. There are three nutraceuticals.
There are three supplements, and none of them contain vitamin C particularly.
Okay.
None of them contain vitamin C at all.
Why do you need to take those to support your diet? I don't need to take any of that.
It's nothing to do with my diet.
Okay.
They are nutraceuticals that you clearly know nothing about. You should probably find out. You might be interested.
How do you know that they work?
Because there is a peer-reviewed study that suggests that they do what they claim they do.
Oh.
And
but you're
people
referencing
that take them
science.
Universally. No, again, no, I'm not. I'm saying there is a paper available with an inference suggesting that this product does what it says it does.
Okay.
And it's not a nutritional supplement. It's a nutraceutical. It's got nothing to do with nutrition. And it's clear that this is yet another topic about which you are absolutely ignorant.
Yeah, these aren't actually, Victoria, I just got to say that these aren't actually supplements. They're nutraceuticals to sort of help adult stem cell release as you get older. These are products that have helped me to recover as well. Well, they've really sped things up for me. They're not supplements in any way. They're not replacing anything that you can get from the carnivore diet.
Yeah. Anyway, Victoria, you've said ketogenesis is bad for us, and we've proven that that's absolute nonsense. There's no evidence for that whatsoever.
You haven't proven anything.
Well, I have, because there are a lot of people that are ketogenic for a very, very long time that do not have ill effects. The exact same argument you're giving about your sugar diet. So that level of evidence is just as good as what you're providing.
Well, there are people who present
the mouse study as proof that ketogenesis was wrong. So no, that didn't work for you.
That was one study that I shared.
That fat causes glycation, which it doesn't.
It does.
No, it still doesn't.
I have a study to show that one too, but I'm pretty sure that you'll find a way to.
Don't.
I do actually, and a lot of the research that I cite.
This is hilarious, isn't it, kids? Really hilarious. No, you don't have a study that shows that.
I don't think as a viewer has gotten anything out of this conversation.
Well, why would they get something out of it? This is entertainment.
You haven't exactly provided any kind of evidence to support your claims, and then you're not letting me provide evidence to support my claims.
No,
but that's
I'm quite happy for you to present as much evidence as you like, and I will show you what's wrong with your evidence. I don't need to present evidence to counter your positive claims. You're the one making claims here. I'm the one saying there is no science here. There's some pretty good inferences that what you're saying is nonsense. And the mechanisms that you're tapping, the things that you're saying, here's the problem, it's absolutely clear and patent to me as someone that does have a very significant background in this field that you have absolutely not a clue.
Don't you guys think that by taking these nutraceuticals, though, like that there's something wrong with your diet?
No, not at all. Not a damn thing wrong with the diet.
No, these are
nothing to do with nutrition still.
Can I ask David a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you have had cancer, correct?
Yes.
What do you think caused it?
A low-fat diet.
Is that what you were consuming prior?
Yeah, for decades, for most of my life until I was diagnosed, I was consuming a very low-fat diet. I was fat phobic. I made sure I cut all the fat from my diet completely, as much as I could. But there's I had a very high deuterium diet. Deuterium is a very big problem for the mitochondria.
Deuterium is found in fatty meat?
No, it's very low actually. Fat and meat has the lowest source of deuterium than anything else. Carbohydrates are extremely high in deuterium.
It said, from my research, it said grains, but it recommended a diet, a low deuterium diet was fruits, vegetables, nuts, and lean meats.
Research, Victoria, is what's done by scientists in labs.
Yeah.
Okay, what you're doing is review. And what you're doing is incompetent review of the literature. You are out of your depth reading literature. We have shown
David,
that to you very clearly.
I do want to ask if you could share specifics about your low-fat diet that you followed, and what were you just raised this way, eating a low-fat diet?
Well, yeah,
what
I was raised this way. My mother was vegetarian off and on, and she wanted to keep us vegetarian as well through my developing years. And later on, it was I never liked eating animal products, but as a strength and conditioning coach, at one stage I was on the leanest of meats, mostly just chicken breast, but most of my diet was carbohydrates, rice, fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. Even I did eat egg whites, right? I usually avoided the yolks. I didn't have any milk or anything like that, but that's pretty much what led to my diagnosis. I had very low hormone production, I had fatty liver disease, I had stage 3 kidney disease, and ultimately a stage 4 follicular lymphoma.
As a strength coach, did you participate in bodybuilding competitions?
Not bodybuilding, but strengthening. I was more into the conditioning of athletes, and so I did do a lot of weightlifting, and I was a powerlifter at one stage as well.
Did you subscribe to any kind of like intermittent fasting, or do you know about how many calories?
No, I
know. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
No problem. I do have a question. One last question for you, Victoria. What hormone production does your diet support?
All of them: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormone production. It keeps everything in balance.
So what nutrients from sugar or these carbohydrates actually support that?
Glucose.
Just glucose.
Glucose drives the production of hormones. Specifically the thyroid hormone. I have never had any hormone imbalance issues eating the way that I do. Like I said, I've created 3 children. I have a very high fertility level. My thyroid hormone production is always within range. I've never had any issues. with anything.
Yeah, okay.
No, what you say that, but I work with perimenopausal and menopausal women who all
that has nothing to do with what you will experience sometime in the future, almost certainly, by consuming a diet which is inappropriate for your speciation, that being Homo sapiens sapiens, that appropriate diet very clearly, very apparently being hyper-carnivore. Sugar is toxic. Above your individual threshold.
Body is still making sugar even when you're not consuming
at the correct
it. So to say,
level, yes, at the correct level.
What do you think insulin regulates?
What do you think insulin regulates?
When insulin function is when you're experiencing insulin sensitivity, okay? When you consume a meal of carbohydrate, the insulin comes in to direct that flow of glucose to be transferred to glycolysis or to be turned into glycogen, or depending, on what's going on metabolically, to be turned into fat. So what is so problematic about that is only if insulin can't do its job. And that's the problem with eating a carnivore diet, is that you are making your body insulin resistant. So when you do eat carbohydrates, your body is not able to utilize that glucose properly.
Again, rubbish, because what you're talking about is the effect of the thing that we parsimoniously are referring to as the Randall cycle, which is an indicated part of human metabolism, which has evolved over at least 13.8 thousand million years. It works perfectly. Insulin resistance, as you call it, is a construct and not a pathology. The exact reason that sugar is locked out from the cells from the inside is because those cells are replete with all the energetic substrate that they require in the form of fatty acid at that time, and those cells are protecting themselves against a toxic overburden of glucose that they would experience were glucose allowed to pour into the cell according to its concentration gradient.
But gluconeogenesis isn't using fatty acids. It can use glycerol, but it's predominantly breaking down amino acids.
That's got absolutely nothing to do with the thread of this discussion. That is yet another attempt to divert people's attention away from the fact that you've just been absolutely fucking spanked again.
What are you creating glucose from, if not these
glycerol
substrates?
Backbones, lactate, and one or two of the amino acids.
But it predominantly utilizes amino acids. Okay.
Depends on the metabolic situation. In fact, actually, it depends on the situation at that time as to what the predominant precursor is. But that is still absolutely irrelevant to what we are talking about.
I don't think so.
Well,
and the other thing too, let's say you're
as to what you're talking about.
Let's say you're in ketogenesis and you're not eating, you're in a starvation situation, right?
Again, that's not what we're talking about. Now you're changing the topic again.
But you're utilizing the same biomechanics. I am staying on topic. You're going to break down muscle tissue. In fact, anorexics die from heart failure from the breakdown of the tissue because you don't have anything to prevent those amino acids.
The only time you're going to break down muscle tissue when you're not eating enough food is when there's basically no fat left. You will absolutely use the fat stored on your body first. Of course you will.
No, you're using both. You're using amino acid and you're using fatty acid. Then why is it that anorexics
until there is no fat left to speak of still?
And Ozempic is really popular right now. And
again, change the topic again. Another misdirect. No,
because Ozempic induces
yet another statement that was false. Completely false, Victoria.
Induces a level of starvation. A person is eating much less
we're not talking about anything else. We are talking about the fact that you have just been proven wrong again.
You're not proving anything
you do not break down muscle tissue specifically until there is basically no fat left to use. Why in the purple fuck would the human body burn its own fucking muscle tissue when there's fat sat there that can be used? Why would it do that, Victoria?
Because the glucose demand is so high that it needs to utilize both
glycerol
tissues.
Backbones, you silly girl.
Glycerol, lactate, which is breaking down red blood cells, which is why ketogenesis
lactate
causes
comes from the breakdown
anemia.
of glucose, for God's sake. Absolute nonsense. You
Right,
have
but
no idea
red blood
whatsoever what you are
cells
talking about. You have
require
absolutely no
glucose
background
in order
in,
to
in
generate
metabolic
lactate.
process whatsoever. There is nothing you are saying that is functionally correct or factually correct. You are making shit up. It's ridiculous.
Hello.
So everybody
Okay.
is
Just a question.
right
Sorry,
or
Victoria.
wrong
Just
except
one
for
last.
Bart. So every
Wow.
single
The
textbook, every
stupidity is
single
dripping from every pore.
university is wrong. Every single study out there is wrong, unless
You
it's
haven't
coming
tapped a
from
single study
you.
that's shown me anything I have said is wrong, and
I
neither
just
has
don't
anybody else.
think
And
that
much
it's
more intelligent people than you have had a crack at that, love. Much more intelligent people than you
Actually,
have
I
had a
just
good
have
crack at that.
one question for you, Victoria. So basically, what you are saying is you can lose weight and have perfect hormone production by eating anything, as long as you don't go eat too many calories. Is that basically what you're saying?
I'm saying that energy is tightly regulated, like Bart was saying, in terms of how our body can produce glucose without consuming glucose. Well, when you consume glucose, you have leptin and ghrelin, which are your appetite regulating hormones, as well as insulin that helps to regulate your carbohydrate intake so it doesn't become damaging, right? The only time that carbohydrate is going to be problematic for the system, and I'm talking about exogenous carbohydrate consumption, so we're not making it, we're consuming it, right, is going to be when a person cannot take the sugar out of their blood and put it into their cells. So there's insulin resistance, which to be completely honest, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, insulin resistance is the causative factor for all chronic disease development.
Well, that's false too.
Well, the last thing I want to say is that insulin resistance is caused by impaired glucose tolerance and impaired glucose metabolism.
We've already corrected that fallacy. We have already corrected that fallacy. Repeating the same fallacy again will not change the fact that it's still a fallacy. The exact requirement for the intake of carbohydrates in human beings is still not 1 single gram ever.
Insulin resistance is caused by
there's still a construct.
Glucose metabolism and
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Caused by starvation
of
glucose.
No, it isn't.
And
Still
or a high
nonsense.
fat diet.
No, nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
Sensitivity
Still, no.
is promoted by a dietary intake of excess carbohydrate and a low
No, that's not correct either. No, that's just nonsense.
But fat
absolute
intake
rubbish.
Has to be controlled. Okay. And the other thing too, David, I think in your situation, prior to your cancer diagnosis, I think cutting out the animal product completely and regulating your protein intake probably would have had an effect on the development. And there's other things too at play that could have, influence that as well. But animal protein intake is associated with elevated IGF-1 levels that promote tumor cell growth or can promote
absolute rubbish. You are talking about a relationship found in isolated cells in vitro. There are no studies whatsoever that can talk about the etiology underpinning cause of cancer in free living human beings. Still.
Cancer, from what I understand, is caused by an excessive amount of oxidative stress.
Yeah, but what you understand, love, is dick about fuck. That's what you understand. You're just making up shit and using big words completely out of context, which absolutely show anyone with any background, actual background in this area, that you are absolutely pig ignorant in this field.
Oxidative stress is caused by environmental factors like pollutants, tobacco smoke, utilizing tobacco yourself, pharmaceutical medication, other exogenous toxins, alcohol
Those
consumption.
are correlates to a measurement of oxidative stress.
Right.
They are not the cause of the oxidative stress.
Is a common byproduct of metabolism. The the reactive oxygen species, free radicals, right? The problem is when they
at a correct and indicated level, yes. With the correct
Right.
and indicated diet, the correct level of stress is imposed, and the body deals with that stress via its normal homeostatic mechanism. It's not a problem.
I was just speaking to the audience more so if they are.
Yeah, because you actually can't deal with speaking to me, because I'm going to correct you every time you say something that's fundamentally absolutely garbage.
I think it's important to educate the audience because they're here.
Well, you're not in a position to do that, though, because you are out of your depth. You're making shit up that is fundamentally absolutely false. In fact, like fat causes glycation. No, it fucking doesn't. Still, for example, making up things, saying research shows, and then getting absolutely caned on that.
But I just don't think that the viewers have really taken anything away from this.
It's been
Especially on
entertainment.
your side, right? That's it's
because all of my people are smart enough to see straight through your ridiculous fucking nonsense.
Yeah,
right
but
from the
a lot of
beginning.
your people end up as my clients.
No, they don't. None of my people end up as your clients. No, they don't.
Sorry, Bart.
No, they don't.
Victoria, I've got one thing is amino acids are the building blocks of the body. So how do you replenish that in your diet with if they're just carbohydrates?
Well, I generally recommend that people stick to the RDA, which is 46 grams a day for women, 56 grams a day for men. The other thing too that it's important to note is that insulin drives protein synthesis. So insulin isn't inherently a bad thing, right? We want it to be functioning properly so that it can do.
I think we lost you there.
So it's not that people need to, avoid consuming protein whatsoever, but just to regulate their intake so it's sufficient but not too high. And I'm able to.
Your diet is 90% carbohydrates, 5% protein, and 5% fat.
Yeah, and I'd say my protein intake range is anywhere from 30 to 60 grams a day.
That's completely insufficient for long-term health.
Yeah, I've had absolutely zero problem eating this way and raising three children on my breast milk.
Okay, so you keep saying, and I keep saying, well, you just keep doing what you're doing, love, and you'll see what happens. There will be a told you so moment.
And I'd like to see what happens with you too, Bart, because your risk for cardiovascular disease is very
absolute garbage. There is no evidence whatsoever to support that ridiculous claim still. Not one single data point exists to suggest that there is any risk for me related to my diet of any kind. Yet another
like this is just like a
fact that you've just made up or pulled out of some orifice.
Well, we'll let time tell what happens to us both.
It will.
Well, I think that's all we can do. However, I will state there are some people out there who have only eaten meat and high fat diets for several decades. One lady in Canada, a cattle farmer, who's been eating carnivore diet for 67 years, and she's extremely healthy and young. Another one, Rick in Florida, America, has been eating this way for 42 years.
Rick's in the chat now. Hey, Rick.
I think, though, you're saying two people, but the largest study on a population eating a carnivore diet was done on the Eskimos, and it showed that when they started diversifying their diet and they had access to other foods, that their lifespan increased.
Yeah, and what else was associated with that? They get in contact with the more westernized nations, the more technological nations. Other than a change in food, what else occurred?
I don't know. You tell me, Bart.
Well, they got access to better healthcare.
But healthcare doesn't always equal longevity.
Well, it does. In fact, if you have a group of individuals who have no access to healthcare, even though we both agree probably that healthcare is not optimal in the way it's done, against the population of people that do have access to that, the ones that tend to live longer are the ones that actually have access to the sick care industry, it seems. It's a confound.
So you're saying that
it
wasn't
What you're saying is there's a group of people that we looked at who had a change in their life expectancy associated with a change in their diet without controlling all the other factors that also changed commensurate with the contact with these more westernized societies. It's called a confound.
But if their diet,
it's a basic, no, you hold on. It's a basic scientific tenet to understand that if you're going to say, oh, look what happened when we did this, you need to control everything else. Otherwise, you don't know what the cause was or the effect was. It's a basic scientific principle.
If they were eating carnivore, though, and their diet was so perfect, why did they need healthcare?
What?
Yeah.
Do you think the carnivore diet alone solves all health problems?
I think.
Do you think any diet will solve every health problem? No. There are many health problems that occur unrelated to diet. Perhaps living in a very extreme environment at the very top of the world where it's damned cold might well be something that could be problematic. And in fact, it is. One of the things that affects the lifespan of the Inuit, for example, is quite a high rate of infant mortality, which is associated with a SNP that they've got, which is useful in terms of survival in other ways, but means that the infants are much more likely to die in infancy. Ergo, you write down the age at death of everybody, and it brings down the total expected lifespan. But that doesn't actually tell you anything about the population in terms of how long the ones that are surviving to adulthood actually do live. It's a matter of looking at all the data, Victoria. It's a matter of understanding the whole situation and not pointing to a single relationship in isolation and saying, look, there's my proof for something, or implying that. It's
I'm just
absolutely
sharing
ridiculous.
information.
What you're doing is trying to make an argument by using a completely invalid, vacuous construct.
Well, the other thing is that if you look at population studies, the traditional Asian cultures who have eaten the least amount of animal products, and I'm not saying they haven't eaten.
No, they haven't. That's not true either. That's
carbohydrate diet.
And you're just making shit up again. That is not correct.
I think everybody knows that traditional Asian cultures, they eat rice.
Everybody knows. Yes, we know they eat rice, but you said they eat less meat.
Right, they did,
and that's not correct.
There was population studies that were done that showed that of all the populations in the world, that the traditional Asians ate the least. They had access to the least amount of animal products.
Who do you mean by who are the traditional Asians, Victoria, that you're talking about? Who are these traditional Asians?
Rural Asia. Anyways, they had the lowest incidence of...
No, not anyways. No, you've been asked a question. Who are these Asians that you're talking about?
I already said it's rural Asia.
Victoria, if I might just interject just a little bit, I spent 10 years in Japan, and if you're referring to the blue zones studies, is that what you're referring to? These studies are absolutely ridiculous to say the least. Japanese, Okinawa is praised as being one of the highest, longest sort of living people around the world because of their diet, and they said that they ate mostly vegetables and sweet potatoes, which is a lie. They relied on them after the Second War because they were basically in poverty and starving.
Right.
Okinawa, in by health comparison to the rest of Japan, which they do every year, they do a prefecture study in Japan. Okinawa is actually the lowest in their health results every year consistently because of their alcohol use. But they also consume a large amount of seafood, pork, and other meats. And if you want to talk about longevity, the longest living people are actually Hong Kong, where they actually eat, by comparison, far more meat than anywhere else. The French have one of the lowest heart disease risks around the world, and they eat a lot of meat, especially horse meat, which was made popular after the siege of Alexandria, when the military doctor fed them on horse meat to cure scurvy because of the vitamin C content.
Remember, meat that doesn't contain any vitamin C, Victoria? That same meat that does. Yeah.
And if you want to talk about the Inuit, Wilhelm Stephenson spent 13 summers with the Inuit. They had zero deficiencies as he studied them. In their diet, they had zero deficiencies. So there's a lot of history that's back there.
Well, vitamin C was discovered because people were developing scurvy, and that's where the
people that were developing scurvy, people like such as the British Navy, they were eating biscuits. They were eating basically just dried bread biscuits. They weren't eating meat either. The people in the Civil War in America, they were eating biscuits as well. Both times, though, before they started taking fruit on the naval ships, pre-citrus, when they got to shore, they ate meat to cure scurvy. And in the Civil War, was it their doctor? I forget his name, but Dr. Salisbury, which they named the steak Salisbury steak after. He cured their scurvy because they were on a diet of biscuits with meat, an all meat diet.
Why isn't meat recommended as a source of vitamin C then, according to just general nutrition guidelines?
Because general nutrition guidelines can I answer this, Dave, for goodness sake? Am I here just
hold on a second. But they're recommending the consumption of meat, though. The consumption of meat is recommended, but why isn't that indicated as a source of vitamin C?
Because there's not a lot of vitamin C in meat, and there is a false belief out there that a lot of vitamin C is better, and it isn't. There's also a lack of understanding that on a carnivore diet, you need very little vitamin C, precisely because the main transporter of vitamin C is GLUT4.
So you're not utilizing GLUT4, so therefore you don't think you need the vitamin C, correct?
No, that's absolute rubbish. That shows a complete misunderstanding of what I've just said. What I said was that the main transporter for vitamin C is GLUT4. Now, if GLUT4 is not busy transporting glucose all the time, then the vitamin C at a much lower level will get into the cells, doesn't have to outcompete glucose to try and get in there. So the need for vitamin C in a carnivore diet is vastly lower than for someone who eats any amount of plant material.
Do you have a study to prove that?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Yes, you can go and look that up if you want to.
Where?
Unlike you, Victoria, I don't just make shit up. You can go and check everything I've said.
Nothing has been made up that I've discussed here today.
Yeah, you did. You said that fat causes glycation. No, it doesn't. You said meat doesn't contain vitamin C.
I have a study that can prove that.
No, you don't still. You said that before, and you still haven't produced one because you still don't.
Here, I'll pull it up.
Okay, you pull up your study and we'll show you what's wrong with it. Very good.
Okay.
Oh, my God. Unbelievable kids, isn't it? Okay. For those who understand that, there are a lot of things that are just basic accepted facts in science, those people will understand that what I've just said is correct, and that is that the main transporter for vitamin C into the cells is GLUT4, and that when the glucose concentration in the blood is not vastly spiked all the time, as it is in someone that eats an inappropriate diet full of contraindicated, unnecessary, toxic carbohydrates, then the vitamin C enters those cells much, much more easily through that transporter. Ergo, the need for vitamin C is much less, which is backed up anecdotally very clearly by the fact that the number of established cases of scurvy in people who have been eating nothing but the meat and flesh of animals for multiple decades is none. Not one.
Do you think you'd pass an oral glucose tolerance test?
I know I would. I absolutely know I would.
You think so? Really? You should show it on your channel. I think that would be a really good indication.
Why would I do that? There is absolutely no indication whatsoever that there's a problem with my glucose.
I think that you're insulin resistant, so prove us wrong.
Why would you think that? Based on absolutely no ability to even understand that meat contains vitamin C and that glycation is sugar damage and not fat damage, you silly girl. Why would we take anything you have to say seriously on that basis?
asking you to show the audience at some point, your audience, that you can pass an oral glucose tolerance test.
Why would I do that?
What do you mean?
End?
Why?
Why would I do
To show
that?
that you don't have insulin resistance from the way that you
Insulin
eat.
resistance is still a construct.
That's
and an oral glucose
fine
tolerance
if that's
test
your opinion,
will not,
but according to
excuse me, an oral glucose
conventional
tolerance test
medicine,
will not inform on my insulin status. The only way to find out anything about my insulin status is to track both glucose and insulin after an oral glucose load.
right?
And if I had been slightly more adherent to carnivore than I have been lately, it is likely that glucose would hang around in my blood a bit longer than you might expect. And that's not a pathology. That is my system working exactly as it should. Because, love, the glucose bolus was completely contraindicated and unnecessary. My cells probably don't want that glucose, and as such, it will sit there for a bit longer. That is my system working normally. That is not a pathology, and it is not this thing that you're referring to as insulin resistance in a stupid and ignorant way.
So why do you go off carnivore and eat something that has carbs in it?
Because I'm a human being and I'm a hedonist and I'm not perfect. I enjoy a bit of this and that here and there, about 5% of my intakes across time.
Actually,
I've never claimed to be 100%
to that,
carnivore myself, but that doesn't change what's ideal. What's ideal is still 100% carnivore.
So
my diet is not ideal.
The results of
close,
that one study that we well, I'm glad that you're being honest. I have not eaten any animal products.
I have done nothing but be completely and absolutely honest and open with my audience and anyone that wants to argue with me throughout time. Great. I have never been anything but that. So you're suggesting, by lack of a statement to the contrary, you're suggesting by your last comment, I'm glad you're being honest, you are inferring that I'm not usually honest, which is rubbish. I'm always honest.
I think, though, that some people aren't honest that are in the carnivore community. Like, I agree question whether or not Anthony Chiefy does anabolic steroids, and like, I just think that there's
no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. I believe him absolutely when he says he doesn't. Why would he?
He just has some physical characteristics that kind of indicate.
Everybody that has some muscle is on steroids, are they?
No, not necessarily. Or he's got elevated IGF-1 that is an anabolic, hormone signal for growth.
Or it might be neither of those things. It might be a normal, natural consequence of his lifelong training status as a highly performing athlete.
It could also be too that he goes on and off the wagon also because he
doesn't. No, he doesn't. He's absolutely hardcore
carnivore. Then why isn't he leaner? Like, I would expect him to be much leaner.
How lean would you want someone to be?
Well, if you're running on fat all the time, I would expect your body fat percentage could get pretty low, right?
No, because that's also controlled by your genetics. There's an ideal level of body fat, and it's not super low. That's unhealthy, in fact.
I did want to just.
Why would you expect someone that's running on fat to be very low body fat themselves necessarily?
Well, I think it's dependent on how much fat they're consuming too. So, if you're consuming a lot of fat, then you're obviously going to carry a bit more than.
Right. So you've got no answer to the question then, is what you're saying. You have no idea why you just made that up as well.
I just described that if you're eating a lot of fat, you're going to be putting more of it into storage because your body can only oxidize so much for energy conversion. The rest is going right to storage. Okay, so I did pull up this.
What do you think happens to excess sugar?
Most of it gets converted into glycogen, or you burn it up real quick, and very rarely does it get converted into fat.
Rubbish.
Depends on your
nonsense again.
Insulin status. How come I don't have a lot of
it depends on the energetic status of your cells of your body, in fact. It's got nothing to do with your insulin status per se as a determining factor. In fact, insulin isn't the determiner. It's a player.
Well, I would be interested in what you have to say about, I know that
that would require you to close your mouth and open your ears for long enough. And stop making shit up. That's what that would require.
I know that you don't subscribe to.
I'd be interested to see how your liver is doing. I mean, one of the liver's primary jobs is to turn carbohydrates into fat, basically.
I had a complete metabolic panel done, and everything came back normal. I have no elevated.
So what do you think that informs you on, other than nothing whatsoever?
That my metabolism is working properly.
Are you really that destitute of understanding that you think a single panel of tests taken on one day is going to inform you about your health status meaningfully in any way, shape, or form? Are you really that misinformed?
No, but I do consume close to probably 3,500 calories worth of carbohydrates a day. Bart, I know that you don't.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't consume any calories whatsoever. That
Right.
is a physical impossibility.
I'm just using that as a reference to describe my carbohydrate intake.
Well, why don't you tell us how many grams of carbohydrate you consume? Because that's the thing that's important here.
Okay, I would say I consume anywhere from 800 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrate a day.
Oh, shit. Good luck with that, love. That's all I can say.
I've had zero issues. I have a low
so
body
far,
fat
yes. Still, so far, still, yeah. So,
well,
is that
I'm
a good
waiting.
thing?
When do you think that I would start having problems? Like,
how long's a piece of string? It's a bit individual as to when someone's going to start to fall to bits as a function of, obvious aging and breakdown of various body systems and things. It will happen. Absolutely. There's no two ways about it. We can't give you a date, but it will happen. And you can believe me on that or don't believe me on that. I couldn't give a shit, actually, but it's still a fact. Because exogenous glucose above your individual tolerance is still toxic. It is still the cause of glycation, and fat isn't, by the way, and it's still going to cause you inflammation and breakdown.
I did share. I think my screen is shared right now, so I can show this.
No, we can't see you at the moment.
Glycation. I think. Yeah, there it is. Oh, here we go.
There we go. Okay,
this
right.
is it. Can you guys see this one? Advanced glycation and products in food and a practical guide to their reduction in the diet.
No, we're still looking at the first study that you.
Oh, maybe I have to change it on here. Sorry, guys, I don't exactly know. Okay, I think I have to click out.
You have to select which window you want to share with us.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. I had to click out.
It always, just while you're doing that, Victoria, it always stuns me how many people out there, especially in the chat window over here, do not understand the play acting that's going on with the Grumpy Professor act here. They don't get it. Guys, for God's sake, if you don't like the way I'm presenting it, click off the thing. We don't care. What we're here to do, though, is to have a sensible scientific discussion with a bit of interest in it, a bit of a dumpster fire for interest, but nonetheless, what I'm doing here is I'm educating Victoria on her clear destitution of comprehension of things like science and metabolic pathways, and I'm pulling her up on every comment she's making where she's just making shit up. That's all I'm doing. Right?
I'd be interested in your opinion about Cole Robinson. Because he's gaining a lot of steam now.
Absolute fucking imbecile. He is an imbecile. He is an absolute cocksplat of the highest order. And he will also pay the price for his ridiculous nonsense sooner or later.
Now, Peter Rogers and you actually agree about fructose.
People like that, though, unfortunately, other people that watch them will pay the price as well.
Do you guys consume any caffeine? I'm just curious.
No, I don't.
I do. It's a recreational drug and it's contraindicated, but I do anyway. It's part of that 5% of my intakes that isn't kosher.
It keeps you going. Hey, I know that you threw that ketogenic diet induces the P3. Here it is.
Yeah, that's in the ash can. Yeah, because that's a mouse study. Good. So let's look at this one now.
But I just want to share, though, that it does say that when you take breaks from the ketogenic diet, you don't induce cell damage.
Or how is a study on mice able to inform on anything whatsoever to do with human beings?
I just wanted to share what I thought was
that's my point, though. Just because a study might say some words written by the authors of that study, that doesn't mean those words are correct.
Absolutely. But,
peer-reviewed publications are not some kind of holy canon.
I'm just saying because you take breaks from your ketogenic diet, it's probably going to help you live longer.
I don't consume a ketogenic diet. The carnivore diet properly done is not ketogenic.
Well, right.
The protein intake is much higher on a properly done carnivore diet. Ergo, the level of gluconeogenesis is higher. Ergo, the production of ketones is near zero most of the time. It is not a ketogenic diet, in fact.
Do you think it's interesting that the drug metformin inhibits gluconeogenesis? So they're saying that it's problematic in people who have diabetes?
Metformin, in my opinion, is one of the stupidest things you can put into your body. Followed only by, probably the worst thing that you can put into your body pharmacological drugs-wise, other than the thing that we can't talk about at all, is statins. Statins are ridiculous, contraindicated metabolic poisons, and metformin is designed specifically to override the indicated proper actions of the Randall cycle. It's an absolute recipe for disaster. And anyone promoting even microdosing of metformin or GLP-1 inhibitors really needs to shut the fuck up. Seriously. That's an opinion. Right, let's talk about the study anyway. Let's see what's wrong with this here study that shows absolutely something you said. What does the study show?
Yeah, so do you want to read the abstract?
Do you want me to? Okay.
It says
modern diets
here,
are largely... do you want to read it out or do you want me to?
Well, I want to read out this specifically. Based on animal-derived foods that are high in fat and protein are generally AGE rich and prone to new AGE formation during cooking. Contrast carbohydrate-rich foods such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and milk contain relatively few AGEs even after cooking. And it says dietary advanced glycation end products are known to contribute to increased oxidant stress and inflammation, which are linked to the recent epidemics of diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
That statement is not correct. They're not known to do anything of the sort. False.
And then we've got advanced glycation end products.
That's a statement made by those authors that's not underpinned by actual scientific, interventional, properly controlled studies. That's an opinion.
We've got AGEs.
It's like people that write in papers, LDL is known to cause heart disease. No, that's not true. It's easy to write, but it still isn't correct. And it's not correct to say that AGEs are known to contribute to any heart health outcome in human beings whatsoever. No, they're not. There are no studies that can underpin that claim. Still.
It says here that glycotoxins are a diverse group of highly oxidant compounds with pathogenic significance in diabetes and in other several chronic diseases.
Do you see how that's an opinion?
AGEs are created through a non-enzymatic reaction between reducing sugars and free amino groups of proteins, lipids, or nucleic acids. So that would be would you agree with that statement?
Standalone, yes, but so what?
Okay, so this just goes on to talk about it isn't.
That's right. It does just go on, doesn't it? Does it actually prove or show anything? And it's a mouse study. Did you just say?
So yeah,
I
believe so.
All right, well, we're done with that then, aren't we? Okay, good.
Well, I just found it interesting though that
Well,
it
look,
did show.
Next time I'm talking to a mouse about their health, I will absolutely say, look, Mickey Mouse, here's a study that absolutely has a lot of opinions written by the people that wrote it about mice, and mouses.
Well, I think reason they use mice is because mice are considered to be omnivores, right? So they think humans are omnivores as well.
Which is false. They're
maybe
not.
There's right.
By design, no.
But there is nothing that indicates humans are carnivores, though. Maybe that can be our last piece here before I need to.
Yes, there is. In fact, yes, there is. Yes, there absolutely is. It's called nitrogen 1314 isotope testing. It's an absolute slam dunk.
Are you able to kill an animal though and just eat it straight up? Like, do you do that?
I don't, because I prefer to cook my food first.
But why?
But I could
if
do
you're
that.
Carnivore. Okay.
That makes no sense. The question makes no sense. What do you mean, but why if you're a carnivore?
Well, a true carnivore, which I'm thinking of a lion, right, is going to hunt down its prey. It's faster than you. It's stronger than you. It's got big claws. It's got big teeth to tear into flesh and tear and chew on bones. And
I knew this was coming up. I said last night on a video that I posted on my channel, I bet she's going to say we can't possibly be carnivores though because we don't have the sharp pointy teeth, you see.
Well,
so If anybody had any doubt as to the complete lack of credibility that Victoria has, there it is right there, boys and girls. We can't be carnivores, you see, for we don't have the sharp, pointy teeth. Thank you, Victoria.
Well, you were referencing physiology and comparative anatomy. And if you look at the charts, humans are not exactly carnivores. Also, mammalian carnivores don't live very long in nature. And
well, humans do because we have technology as well. Which we have used to expand our lifespan a bit, and also to limit it.
But animals in the zoo, for instance, are in captivity, right?
Do you see how there's absolutely no logic whatsoever behind this line of argumentation, Victoria? Because if you don't, we're wasting our time here. This is absolutely childlike in terms of your absolute lack of logical engagement. This is destitute.
Well, I think that the viewers, though, are probably thinking the same thing as me, right? So animals in
no, they're not, unless they have an IQ similar to yours, which seems to be about 80, to be honest with you.
Carnivorous animals in captivity.
Yes, of which human beings are one example.
Because of the, medical practice access that they have. Anyways, I'm just
Do you have any idea where you're going here?
Yes, I have dogs.
What is your point, Victoria?
My dogs kill and eat rabbits that come into their area.
So what?
They also eat shit. They drink
Yes, mine do too. Yes. So what, though, Victoria? What is your point?
Vomit. Why don't you do that?
Because I'm not a dog.
But you're saying that you're a carnivore, though. Like, do you eat bones?
Okay.
Do you drink blood?
But I also don't eat. I also don't eat the carcasses of dead whales at the bottom of the ocean.
But why
hagfish
not?
does that. Because I'm not a fucking hagfish. I'm a human being.
Roadkill? Do you get roadkill?
No.
Do you just
because
why not?
It doesn't appeal. Doesn't appeal to me.
So your meat has to be cooked.
I prefer it cooked.
In order for it to appeal to you.
That's right. Yes.
I've seen that you have these really beautiful cows. Do you just like go up to them and just like start tearing them open and just like eating their flesh like a true carnivore would?
Well, no, because what you're saying about true carnivores is just some ridiculous nonsense that you've once again made up. Human beings are true carnivores. So are hagfish, so are lions. We all have different ways of feeding ourselves, don't we? Nonetheless, all three of the animals I've just indicated are carnivores. Lions are carnivores, so are hagfish, and so are human beings still.
But that's an opinion.
It's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's a demonstrated fact with the nitrogen isotope testing. A slam dunk, a hard science, which proves beyond any question whatsoever what human beings have eaten for about 4.5 million years, in fact. Humans and
my husband eats a omnivorous diet, and he, doesn't subscribe to what I do exactly. He has seen benefit from increasing carbohydrates. And I told him that I was coming on today to talk to a guy who followed the carnivore diet. And he said, like, how humans aren't carnivores. Like, you can't
see how you've changed the topic again.
No, I'm saying that when you're
completely diverted away from the fact that you've just been spanked senseless again. You've just said we're not a true carnivore because I don't behave exactly like a lion. Lions are the only carnivore, are they? No. Hagfish. We're done with that one as well. What's next? For goodness sake, Victoria.
The difference, though, is that they all just kill and eat their food. Okay, you don't do that, right? You got to prepare.
Humans do kill the food that they eat largely. Yes, humans do.
You have to heat process it.
I don't have to do any of those things. I choose to do those things. I prefer it when my meat is cooked. That is a preference. It is not a requirement. It doesn't make me not a carnivore.
I'm just saying that if I was a viewer, I don't think you convinced anybody that they should go carnivore with this conversation that we've had today.
When did I say that was my aim here? I never said that. In fact, I explicitly said that is not my aim here. I couldn't give a rip-roaring shit what anybody else does, so long as they're not impeding on my rights. Okay? You eat whatever you want, Victoria. It's no skin off my dick whatsoever. I do not care. What I am here to do, though, is to correct you on your absolute vacuous fucking nonsense. Not a carnivore because we don't have sharp, pointy teeth. Meat doesn't contain vitamin C. Glycation is caused by fat. That's just
Well,
a few
I'll
examples
continue
that have
to
come up
work
today.
with your ex-clients and
No,
the
you won't.
ex-carnivores
None of
because
my
they're all
ex-clients are your
failed
clients. No, they're not.
doing what it is that
No,
you're
they're not. No.
Actually,
Rubbish.
Victoria, if I could just bring up a point there, if you want to compare us to carnivores in the wild, why is it in the wild that carnivore animals don't have heart attacks, whereas
they don't live very long.
do? Yeah,
Ruminant
but that's
animals live a lot longer. Heart disease is a progressive disease. You don't just eat something one day and die of a heart attack. It's an accumulation of damage over time.
not. But
Lions
they are plant-based. Lions don't have heart attacks.
If you're talking about herbivores, right? Their conversion of carbohydrate to fat is much higher. It's seen especially in, well, pigs aren't necessarily herbivores, but they're de novo.
They necessarily are not herbivores, in fact.
Well,
the word, by the
boars
way, is herb, not
usually,
herb. There's an H on the front of it, in case you didn't notice.
I said
Herbivore is the
herbivore.
word.
It's
Yes,
just a
herbivore is
difference
the word.
in accent or
It's not
dialect.
accent. It's an affectation that Americans think that they are able to change the English language as they see fit. You're not.
How do you say banana?
Banana.
There you go. You add an R on the end. It sounds very posh.
That sounds like it to you. But you're actually completely leaving out the H. You're not pronouncing it. There is an H there. It is pronounced. The word is herb.
I said herbivore. Herbivore. That's how you pronounce
no, not
it.
Herbivore. Anyway, this is getting childish again. So let's get back to since yeah.
I need to go drink some herbal tea.
Okay, that's fine.
What you do need to do,
No,
Victoria, is go and have a think about yourself and watch this video back through. Ignore the antics from me. Ignore the play acting of being, abrasive and all the stuff that I do, because that's just the way I do things. But actually self-critique your arguments that you've attempted to make today and understand how vacuous, how poor, how ridiculous, and how nonsensical the garbage that's come out of your gob today has been.
Well, I would really appreciate if you could send me the scientific literature that you think is so grandiose and acceptable, because I would like to take a look at it.
About what topic?
Any of the topics we discussed today. Sugar causing glycation, ketogenesis, humans being carnivores, any of it. Like, I'm open.
If you've got
to
any
reading all
specific
of it.
questions about any specific bits of literature, you can certainly ask me to help you interpret the literature. Something I think you desperately need, someone that actually has some experience in reading literature to help you read it, because you're not competent with reading literature.
It is very easy to throw something out because it's a mouse study. Say, oh, okay, this is completely null and void because it's a mouse study.
We can spend as long as you like on a study. We can go beyond the fact that it's a mouse study and find as many holes in it as you like. It won't change the fact that the two studies that you've tried to tap today are completely irrelevant to human beings and do not support any posit whatsoever, and a competent reader of the science would not have made that mistake.
Well, I am just asking that if you're so sure of the information that you've read, I would just like to read the literature myself as well.
Well, you can search out any literature you like, and then you can send me an email with a piece of literature in it that you think is good, and I'll tell you why it isn't.
Why can't you send me any of the literature that you reference, though?
I didn't reference any
provide
literature.
references, right? But
No, you didn't. You provided mouse studies that we just
to provide. Okay, well then I want to see the hemoglobin A1C information about carnivore ketogenic diet increasing.
No, they're not the same thing. Don't conflate those two things. They're completely different things.
I just gave you
Carnivore
something
diet properly done is not a ketogenic diet. If you want to see a study about
a carnivore diet,
correct. There's also been no research done on any other diet. That's what I've been saying all along. There is no science you can tap that's valid.
Oh, okay. So you don't have anything that you can send me that is valid then?
You haven't asked me for anything on any particular topic. You've tried to conflate two topics as one topic.
I know.
If you want to study about ketogenic diets, ask me for that. If you want to study about carnivore diets, ask me for that. In either case,
I just asked you for the study about the.
Excuse me. In terms of hard health outcomes, I'll tell you that there is no studies available on either diet. If you want to talk about A1C values, we can look at that. Absolutely. I have to go and find that study. You can send me an email and I'll send you that. The one that suggests that red blood cells are very likely to be longer living in people that don't eat much carbohydrate. I could find that pretty easily if I had to.
Well, that's what I just asked, is if you could send me the literature on that.
Absolutely. Send me an email and I'll be happy to send that to you.
David has my email.
Okay.
You could just forward it to Bart.
Yeah. When I get some time, I can dig that out. Yeah, but it's not a priority for me.
Appreciate it.
Finding literature for someone that's not competent to read it is not a priority of mine. But when I get some time, I can certainly do that. You bet.
But don't you think that increasing competency in people who are willing to read the literature should be a goal of yours?
Well, it is a goal of mine to educate people who are willing to be educated. You haven't come across as such a person at all. You've come across as an arrogant young person who has not got the background whatsoever to read literature competently, to speak competently about any aspect of human nutrition or metabolism, and has made a bunch of glaring false statements like vitamin C is not contained in meat, glycation is caused by fat, ketogenesis causes senescence, and a bunch of other ridiculous nonsense that you've said today that was absolutely not supported in any way, shape, or form by science.
Do you provide references to what you cite in your videos, like in the description box?
If I need to cite any literature, I do. Normally,
so otherwise,
normally the literature that I talk about is when I'm pulling literature to bits. So it's up on the screen the whole time, usually. Okay. Like I did a recent video, and I'm actually going to do another one as well where I go into more detail, pulling to bits this ridiculous keto CTA study done by those young men that should not have done so.
Okay. Well, I gotta go.
Yeah, that's fine. It's been actually
fun.
Quite a long debate, much longer than we thought it was going to be. Actually, just before you go, though, Victoria, I really do appreciate you taking the time and showing up today. It takes a lot of guts to confront Bart as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does.
But
it does.
You were talking about supplements before. So what type of supplements do you take for you to fill gaps in your diet?
Just B12.
Just B12. Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, I think we'll end it there today. I think, honestly, we could probably do this for much longer, but I think both are very busy people. I want to thank them both for participating in this debate. Now, whether doesn't matter which side you're on, but I think you can draw your own conclusions from what just happened. And thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. Just hang about, guys, and I'll just end that there.